Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome in Salesforce Apex Hour. My name is Amit Chaudhary. I'm the founder and the host of Apex Hour. So today topic is 10-step journey to the Salesforce solution architect, and we have a special speaker, Prashant, with us. So let me hand over to Prashant for his introduction and the presentation.
Thank you so much, Amit. Absolute pleasure always to come and speak at Apex Hours, and always a pleasure to be on a call with you. So thank you so much, and yeah, again, big thanks for all the work you're doing for the entire community. Just delight. I think nowadays you just need to go to Apex Hours if you have a question, you get at least some video there covering something. So it's amazing. Um, so thank you again, and thank you to everyone who's joined the session. So today we'll talk about a 10-step journey to becoming a Salesforce solution architect. Of late, in the last few months, solution architect role has become very prominent in the Salesforce world. There's been a lot of talk about it. Of course, we've got the new certification also out, and then we have more certs in the pipeline. But more importantly, there's been a consolidation and clear definition around what that particular role entails. With all that in mind, I know there's a lot of documentation how to take the certification, how to study to become a solution architect. What I wanted to do as part of this was to take a step back, especially for those young professionals out there who probably just started or a few years into their Salesforce journey, and they're looking to set a goal of becoming a solution architect in the next 4, 5, 6 years. How do you get to that journey? So what I wanted to present here is not a quick 10 step of getting there, a sprint, but more of a slow marathon where you slowly learn and build your expertise across different areas, and eventually become a solution architect, and to help you give you some direction to get to that particular journey. So with that, let's get started. Let me a quick background about myself. My name is Prashant Nambishan. I have over 18 years of experience, most of which has been in the Salesforce space, playing leadership or consulting roles. I hold 16 Salesforce certifications, and before Salesforce, I had experience in management consulting, sales, and finance, and before that, I did my MBA at IIM Bangalore. My Twitter, LinkedIn handles are given here, so feel free to connect with me, follow me. And my website, salesforcecouple.com, you may be aware, we've got a bunch of blogs there. So I'll write more about this journey as well in that particular website as well. So do feel free to follow, subscribe, and share your feedback. So as part of this session is a very simple agenda. We'll define, so it's a journey, right? So it's a 10-step journey. So we'll first start with defining what is the end goal, meaning where do we want to reach. We'll pick a starting point, and then we will simply walk the 10-step journey. So it's as simple as that from an agenda perspective. So let's start by defining the goal. Right? The goal is to become a Salesforce solution architect. But what is a Salesforce solution architect? Now, the Salesforce solution architect has a few key skill sets which are needed. First is that you need to understand multi-cloud solutions. And when I say multi-cloud solutions, we're talking about different products of Salesforce working together. So for example, if you've got Sales Cloud and B2B commerce and CPQ and everything tied together, or if you've got Service Cloud and marketing and marketing cloud, as well as say B2C commerce also tied together. So different domains, they're all working together in the sense that from an end user perspective, the whole experience is seamless. From a human perspective, or a person who's interacting with all these different touch points, there should be no difference in the way they experience it. So the whole entire solution understands the customers and the business as one single entity and in a seamless manner. Now, all these are very vague terms, but again, there's a lot of depth and a lot of detail into how this actually works. So there's a lot of understanding behind it. And for that, you need to build a domain, process, and functional expertise, which is built for both scale and sustainability. And what I mean by that is you need to understand different products very well. You need to understand how they can be built to work together and implemented and deployed over time seamlessly. And how do they cater to business needs across different areas, all in the context that they should be able to scale it at an enterprise level and should be sustainable. And the core of a Salesforce solution architect, if you look at how Salesforce defines it today, is really a balance between three types of leadership. One is technical leadership, next is business leadership, and third is delivery leadership. Now, what that means is it is not a core pure technical play. Like you have the certified technical architect role, which is much more in-depth technical. There's definitely a lot more of core technical knowledge you need. Here you need that understanding, but you should also be able to translate that to business vision. So what you're looking at is to be able to guide companies through multi-cloud solutions so that they can provide a differentiated customer experience. You should be able to take into account what are the implementation considerations, what are the best practices which you should use when you're having a multi-cloud solution, when you're using Customer 360, and how do you use all these products together to align to the vision and goals of business, right? So everywhere you'll see sort of a balance between what is the technical features, how are multiple products working together, and at the same time, how is a business vision or a business goal being met. So it's really, in a sense, a higher level of a techno-functional role. So that's really what we want to get to today. That's the Salesforce solution architect. And in today's world in Salesforce, there's obviously a B2C and a B2B split between those two domains, because primarily those are buckets in which these solution architects work. But of course, there's also a longer vision of a consolidated solution architect as well. But in either it is, if you're looking at B2C, B2B, what you're doing is the same thing. You're looking at a multi-cloud solution and providing expertise across technical, business, and delivery. And very important word here is leadership. And the key part of that is you're not just understanding and having a lot of knowledge in that particular area, but you're also providing direction, you're providing vision, you're providing very clear guidance on what should not be done. So it is someone where you're taking really the front seat in that, in implementing that solution. Okay. So this is where we want to get to, and let's pick a starting point from where we should start, right? For the purposes of this presentation, I've sort of defined a persona of someone who's got about 2.5 years of Salesforce experience, probably good at Sales Cloud and maybe some platform foundational knowledge, has a mix of Apex and admin development experience over these 2.5 years, probably admin PD1 certified, and looking to prepare for Sales Cloud consultant because the person's working in that particular area, and of course wants to become a Salesforce solution architect someday, right? So this is the persona or the person we are starting with from a 10-step journey perspective, and now we will proceed to that particular journey. Before we start on the journey, let's take a look at how this road looks like. Now there are two aspects. If especially those who have worked on in Salesforce area, you will know that many times you're working on a particular project. A couple of years you may be working on a large implementation on Marketing Cloud, for example, or you may have done something for a long duration on Sales Cloud. So what happens is your experience generally gets bucketed into that area because you only have that level of experience because your project has been only in that area. But over time, you're also reading up and understanding about different products. So there is one aspect of your how you grow is your experience, and there's another aspect which you yourself also will help drive is your knowledge. You may know more than what you have actually done from a practical experience perspective. So the way I've defined this road is where you'll both grow in experience and grow in knowledge. So one, you will try to pick on projects which will help you move in that direction of solution architect and try to gain experience there. And at the same time, in parallel, if you're not meeting or you're not getting all those chances, you also yourself invest in trying to learn proactively in many areas. So the road, if I may say so, has sort of two parts of it which you would cross. And obviously, I've chosen not a sort of a well laid out road. It's a dusty road because oftentimes you'll end up making your own direction, doing some course correction over the time. But the key, of course, is to make sure you have your end goal in sight. So with that, let's start off in our first few steps of the journey. So if I take the first two steps, right? So remember, we're starting from the initial persona we defined, someone who's got about 2.5 years experience, bit of admin and Apex, and also Sales Cloud experience. What should that person do? So in the initial stages, at this point, if you're looking to become a solution architect, obviously it's not an overnight journey. What I would recommend is starting off from an experience perspective, build on the experience in that current focus area. right? Understand that project in its entirety. So first, when I say build on the experience in the current focus area, is really for this person to look at Sales Cloud. They're working on Sales Cloud, make sure you understand it very well. Also, if you're working on a project which has Sales Cloud and you may be working on one part of it. So let's say you're working on, say, opportunity splits, or you're working on forecasting, or you're working on product management, but you have not really fully understood certain parts of it, maybe lead conversion or some of the other areas, right? So what you should do is sort of understand that project fully, work with your team members, look at the other user stories, see how the implementation is done. And the goal is really, you're working on a particular product, make sure you understand it fully, right? You become the master of Sales Cloud, if you may. And what that means is you're not really looking from a solution architect perspective at this point, but what you're doing is building a foundation. You're using that experience of whichever cloud. So I've taken Sales Cloud as an example, but if you're working on something else, take that product, right? And the third bullet point I think is most important. Learn how users are actually using the product. So once you do the deployment, if you get a chance, try to meet with some end users, see them use that product in action. Now, it may be that you may not learn anything new, you know it in and out, but there is always some learning when you're actually seeing users use the product. It really comes to life. And a lot of things which you did from an implementation perspective make a lot of sense. Okay. Now that's the experience angle of the first step. See, that's what your project has given. But what can you do in parallel from a knowledge perspective? And that is the second step. Second step is, so in the Sales Cloud example, learn that product as much as possible. Now, even your project will have a limited scope. It won't cover everything in Sales Cloud. Pick out all the other different areas, build scenarios which are not covered in the project, and make sure you try to do sort of try it out in your demo org, do the trailheads, keep up with the release notes, right? And potentially from a certification perspective, these are areas sometimes you start taking certifications on these areas. So you may do a Sales Cloud consultant certification, right? Marketing, you might do a marketing email specialist certification. So you do whatever certification which will help you as well from a knowledge perspective. And the reason I say that is not just to get the certification tag, because oftentimes the certifications are designed to give you a very good comprehensive overview of a particular product. And also the certifications define a minimal sort of qualified candidate, in the sense that you should at least have a bare minimum this much knowledge across that area. So it forces you to learn and gives you a structure and framework which to learn. So if you prepare for that certification in a true and honest manner, it will definitely increase your knowledge. So what you're trying to do at the end of these first two steps, and it may take a year or so, whatever time it takes, is really build a core expertise, right? Setting a solid foundation of how you understand Salesforce solving for a specific business use case. So in this case, you may really say that, okay, after I really do all these, take these first two steps, I can talk about a sales process and how Salesforce helps to solve or build for that sales process. And you know it really well. So this is just the beginning of that particular journey. And the important thing is you're setting your foundation. What I would also recommend at this point is to make sure you get some of the core foundations of the platform also. So for example, understand how sharing and security works. Like understand how the object model is set up, right? Understand some of these implications of how say large data volumes are impact your system. So just basics of how the platform works, some of the best practices when you're using Apex triggers and so on, just so that you're really clear on the fundamentals. So the first two steps is to get your fundamentals strong. Pick one area where you can be really good at. That's your starting point. But again, we are moving towards a solution architect. So what should be the next two steps? So the next two steps, what I would recommend at this point is start expanding, right? From an experience perspective, see if you can get an experience in a related or a closest cloud. Now, what that means is, so for example, if you're doing um, B2B commerce and CPQ, those are two clouds which are sort of speak to each other, right? If you're doing community cloud and say service cloud, there are some overlaps. So look at clouds which have some sort of a relation to each other, where you can have a business process which spans across those. If you can get an experience where you have, when you're working on a two cloud solution, fantastic, right? But if you're also working on a project where, let's say, Sales Cloud is already implemented, and now they're moving to implement Service Cloud, right? How to try and look at and work with those different teams. Look at how sales users are using Sales Cloud, how the business users from Service Cloud are going to use Service Cloud. How do the systems talk to each other? What are the common objects, right? Now, in this case, there may be no integration, but if there's some sort of integration, try to see how that works. So look at from an experience perspective, you can get a project which is aligned and extends to your core area of expertise. You're heading in the right direction of becoming a solution architect. And with that, of course, your parallel step, your other leg, if you may, should look at knowledge around that. So gain knowledge on those two clouds, how they work together. And this, I think, is a good point where even if you're not a developer, at least get some basic understanding of how APIs work, how systems talk to each other, what are some of the offerings from Salesforce like MuleSoft, how do they basically connect and speak to each other? And what this helps you do at this point, when you sort of just started on that next step, is gain expertise in a related cloud, and you start understanding the basics of how two Salesforce products work together. And again, I've said process, technology, and business views. So technology is, of course, very straightforward. It could be as data transfer, how you build integration, how the object model sort of ties in together. Process is not. I'm also thinking from an implementation or deployment perspective. What are the dependencies? What are the things you have to take into consideration? Right? What are the limitations which are there? So those sort of areas as well. And then, of course, the business view is again equally critical. So as you will see when I'm talking this journey, you're looking at both the technical and the business side. So the business view is how users are going to use this. If you can look at or identify user stories or features which sort of cut across different clouds, two clouds, right? How do they move from sales to service, or marketing to sales, for example, right? How does a lead handoff work? How does it move from a marketing cloud to sales cloud? So this is where you're starting to get that sense of moving across different products from Salesforce, and how does that impact both from when you're trying to build those solutions, how does that impact the different stakeholders you have at play, and what you may also realize that sometimes, say for example, if it's marketing and sales, they may be working in silos, but you're actually building a solution which connects the two. So look at those points of handoff. How does a qualified lead get handed off from marketing to a sales rep, for example, right? What does the marketing person do with it? What does the salesperson do with it? And how does Salesforce enable it? So this particular second step of that second, or I would say third and fourth steps of that journey, where you're looking at experience and knowledge, is really building on that particular initial foundation which you've already set, and now you're expanding it to a second level of knowledge, right? So that's sort of, you've started off in that direction. And what I would also say, if I take a step back, is at this point you probably want to look at some certifications also in those related clouds. You may want to start at least preparing for some of the certifications around integration and so on. May not be ready there yet, but you're looking to sort of broaden your expertise in Salesforce. The next step, of course, is now you also probably want to start looking at some Salesforce products which have sort of a plug and play in different areas. Right? Now here it could be areas like MuleSoft or Heroku or Analytics. You'll see them getting repeated. They're not tied to one particular, say, sales cloud or marketing cloud. They work across the platform, and they play very key specific functions. And those requirements come into play in many projects, right, irrespective of where you start off with. So if you can get some experience around those, if you can gain an end-to-end understanding of even one of those areas, fantastic, right? And what that helps you do is you really start understanding the overlay of all these areas. So see, for example, how many of these Einstein recommendations or discovery, or how does that play? How does analytics and Tableau work to give you so much of insights into the data you have? How does Heroku help you sort of move large data volumes and work with that? How does MuleSoft provide all the different 3 layers of APIs and connectivity between systems, and what's really the capability it brings to the table, right? Even if you understand one of them very well, if you can get a project on one of them, what that helps you do is it helps you look beyond a core product understanding of Salesforce, It helps you start connecting to enterprise. It helps you start connecting to different visuals and use cases which are beyond that core particular product. So at the same time, if you say get a project on MuleSoft, make sure you're also learning some basics of the others. So from a knowledge perspective, what I recommend is start learning about those key use cases, right? What each of these products support. Understand some of the limitations, what are the best practices, map those products to the businesses. So if I take a step back on this slide, what I'm trying to say here is in the first 4 steps which you took, right, around experience and knowledge, you have been working primarily on the Salesforce platform or Salesforce clouds. Here you're looking at some of these areas which can be applied across different clouds. So be it Heroku or Analytics or MuleSoft. So build an experience at least in one if you can, and start learning about the others as well so that you can map them to different business goals. And the objective by this fifth and sixth step is really to gain a strong understanding of how Salesforce offerings work together, right? At this point, what you should have gained is really looking at start looking at the bigger picture. You're augmenting and extending functionality across businesses processes, and if you start understanding these projects and putting things together, you will see how they're all working together. And the key here is no more silos. At this point, you should have a solid understanding and at least some level of experience in getting 2-3 business processes to work together, 2-3 products to work together, and also start augmenting them with additional products with Salesforce offers. So this is really a leap towards getting a sort of a view of what the solution architect entails. So you're getting closer and closer to the journey, and if you've got that experience and knowledge by this time, it will really help you. So at this point, we are getting to the next 2 steps, and this is getting a broader domain expertise. So here you want to, if possible, work on larger projects, enterprise level sort of implementations. You want to look at something which spans across different areas. If you can gain expertise in the same business domain, great. And what you want to do is relatedly try to understand some business concepts. How does business work? So pick a domain. For example, if you're picking financial services or retail or manufacturing, whichever areas you probably have most experience on, try to understand that business domain a little bit better. And that really will help you, because if you start looking at what are the business drivers, then how do they drive their revenue, how do they lower their cost, and what is really how is cash flow important to them, how does supply chain impact the success of their business. So if you start understanding those concepts which are not really technical, but it will make a lot more sense to you by this time, because you've done a lot of implementations on different projects and you've also spoken with business stakeholders, right? So now when you start reading the slide, when you're understanding core business concept and drivers or learning about Salesforce industry products, this will make sense at this point if you have taken all the previous steps where you are engaging not just with the technical stakeholders, but also with the business stakeholders. So the key here is really a strong understanding of how technology supports business. From a knowledge perspective, certification perspective also, I would say probably by around this time, you should start looking at areas where probably around integration and if possible, some of the industry solutions, start getting more and more knowledge around those. If you need to take specific courses for you to understand how business works, definitely I would recommend that. Definitely do a lot of reading around the material which is available currently. I know Partner Learning Camp has a lot of material. This ton of material on Trailhead. Look at a lot of those business specific use cases, how those are supported, where they talk about different scenarios and how implementations are done. So in by this time, the 7th and 8th step of that overall journey, what I think you would reach is to a point where you've got a great understanding of how Salesforce and business works together. And that's what you want to achieve as you get to sort of the closest next step of that particular journey, right? So in the last 2 steps is really you're working on a true multi-cloud implementation. So when I say that is you're actually now coming really closest to what a solution architect does. You're taking proactive leadership roles. I sort of emphasize on proactive leadership roles is because, especially in your career, what may happen is you may not always get the sort of projects which you need or which you're asking for, but to really get to there or to accelerate it, ask for those roles. And really, a lot of learning happens where there's a lot of challenges when you're solving complex business use cases. So if you can get such projects, if you can work on such areas, demonstrate leadership, take up challenges which sort of stretch you, those would definitely help. So with that, you should have a sort of an end-to-end understanding of sort of the multi-cloud solutioning perspective, sort of a B2C and B2B perspective. Of course, here also at this point, you should have a good understanding of products like Customer 360 and how it ties in all together. Things like Global Party ID and how sort of you get a human view of a customer. And then, of course, there's a lot of material. There are certifications around B2C solution architect, and we have the B2B also coming out shortly. And with this overall sort of a perspective, what you would get is really experience into what a solution architect role provides. So if I take a step back, right, just sort of recapping on what we went through over the sort of 10 steps, the key thing I would say first is have a clear direction of where you want to achieve. Start off with one area, start becoming sort of really good at that. So whether it's Sales Cloud or whatever, be very good at that. At the same time, start building your understanding of business. And to do that, the best way is to speak with the actual users of the system. Then expand into sort of related clouds, build your area and expertise around that. If possible, something which you can have at least a two cloud solution, and then look at and gaining expertise in that area as well. Look at affiliated products like MuleSoft and Heroku and so on, which plug into different areas in Salesforce, and then build that expertise on and potentially take certifications in those areas. And then, of course, what you want to augment that and bring everything together is when you have an overall business understanding of how Salesforce supports comprehensive solutions. Look at industry solutions. And when you look at industry solutions, you get a good idea of how that particular industry works. Obviously, each of those specific clouds which are for that particular industry has objects and functionality and features and inbuilt flows which support a lot of those core business processes. So once you understand business, it starts making a lot more sense. And then hopefully with sort of, it all comes together is we get to work on some of these true multi-cloud implementations, uh, to really understand how areas like Customer 360 work. Hopefully at this point also you can start looking at taking certifications which are around the solution architect space, which is already there and which are also in the pipeline. And with that, you can potentially and hopefully get to what you want to be. Is it sort of a true solution architect at the end of the day? So this is, I know it's a fairly short presentation, but I think what I wanted to do was to give you that overall picture of how to plan for that particular road, right? That particular journey, how you can get there if you were starting early. Maybe you're early in your career learning Salesforce and seeing how do I get there. You've got a lot of different paths for different trailblazers and your careers. A solution architect is definitely something which a lot of people should aspire to be, especially if you have that knack of looking at both the business and technical side of things. If it's something which challenges you, definitely an area where Salesforce is putting a lot of investment from what we are seeing. And I think definitely an area where you not only helps you from a career perspective, but really you'll see a lot of value because you're actually sort of delivering to that business vision, which is really the reason why which sort of Salesforce product exists, right? So that's my quick take on how you can plan your overall journey from sort of an early stage to becoming a solution architect. With that, I want to definitely open it up to any questions, Amit, if you have, and take it from there.
Yeah, definitely. So let me allow everyone to mute yourself. So if somebody had a question, please unmute yourself and ask a question directly.